Ohio Governor John Kasich may have lost his bid to become President of the United States, but he has certainly not backed away from the national political spotlight. Fresh off of a tour announcing his new book, Two Paths, the governor is here amid a very busy news week, and he joins us to discuss some of the most important issues impacting Americans. Governor, welcome to the Wall Street Journal.
Well, I should let everybody know that that was very impressive. No teleprompter, no script. That was great. And no wonder why you're a star.
Well, thank you. I love having you here.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to start with healthcare because it's something you've been particularly vocal about. You have major reservations about the bill that passed the House of Representatives. What could the Senate do?
I have a radical idea that people ought to have health coverage.
Well, what could the Senate do to get you and your fellow Republican governors on board?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for all the Republican governors because most of them we haven't heard anything from. So what I think we need to do, we need to make sure that we reform the system but be in a position where we're not pulling the rug out from under people, because if you don't have primary care, if you have deductibles that are so high that you just can't even go to the doctor, it makes no sense. So we can phase out Medicaid expansion down to the normal match, but it shouldn't be done overnight.
Well, you wrote this letter, along with 3 other Republican governors, to Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, suggesting ways that might be better ways to reform Medicaid. Now, the Republicans did tweak the American Health Care Act. They made some changes. Are you satisfied with those changes?
Well, I guess that maybe a tweak would be the right description, because they're nowhere close to what needs to be done.
What do you want to see?
I want to see more resources, and I want to make sure that 20 million Americans don't lose their health insurance, and there's ways to do that. We're covering 700,000 people in Medicaid expansion in my state, and I can't really tell you how many are on the exchange, but if all of a sudden those people don't have health insurance, they're living in the emergency room, they're sicker, they're more expensive, and that's not the way to manage the system.
So if Republicans ultimately pass a bill that looks like the bill that passed the House, how do voters in Ohio and across the country react?
I can't predict that. I mean, I would hope that, first of all, I hope it doesn't happen. So, and if it does happen, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be in trouble, and I can't tell you what they're going to do. Many of them would feel as though the system doesn't work, that no one cares about me, and I don't think that's good for the long-term health of America. So it's not like a giveaway program. It should be a hand up, not a handout, and I think we can design programs that way. We've designed it that way in my state.
And I want to talk about the budget as well. That's also big news this week. You know a thing or two about balancing budgets. The White House just laid forth their plan to cut $4.5 trillion over 10 years. And that includes slashing things like Medicaid, food stamps, farm subsidies, foreign aid, cuts across the board, really. The White House says this is a taxpayer-first budget. How do you characterize it?
Pretty much dead on arrival. I mean, the Congress isn't going to just pass this budget. I don't get too worked up about it, because now it goes to the House, it goes to the Senate, and they'll get into the committees, and they'll, I believe, will come up with something that's I don't know what they'll come up with. We haven't had a full budget for a long, long time. There's no attempt at all to deal with Social Security or Medicare, and it's just not realistic to think that you can get these things done unless you are taking a comprehensive approach, a reform approach to the entire operation of the federal government.
When you're approaching $20 trillion in national debt.
It's going to be over $20 trillion, and as it gets to be a larger and larger percentage of the gross national product, we know that when it gets to a certain level, you start to see real economic misery, and we can't have that. So
how do you balance
fiscal
responsibility with compassionate conservatism?
Well, guess what? You reform. You set priorities. You're imaginative and creative in the way in which you approach things. When somebody says to me, well, why don't you like this budget? Because I think it has the wrong priorities. I don't think it's reform-oriented. I think it's a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper.
Well, and this budget assumes 3% growth.
Well, you can assume anything, you know. I mean, but the question is you have to achieve it.
Right. Well, and part of the way Republicans want to achieve that is cutting taxes. Yeah. You support cutting taxes. Yeah, individual and business taxes.
Well, I'm frankly not so much for the individual taxes unless they're geared at the middle class and the working poor. I believe that the corporate rates are too high. They need to come down. I believe that the provisions that the president proposes for small business, giving them incentives, is very good. We can take a look at capital gains and figure out if we want to bring that down a little bit, but bringing down the top rate for those at the top, I think the rich are doing quite well right now.
What about
and I think they would agree with what I just said in most cases.
What about the border adjustment tax?
I understand it's dead, but you know, I don't know. We'll have to see.
Paul Ryan doesn't want it to be dead.
Yeah. Well,
Kevin Brady doesn't want it to be dead. They're still talking about it this week.
Yeah.
How would it impact businesses in Ohio?
I really am not an expert on the border tax, although I know that retailers are very, very concerned about its impact, and I'm just not an expert on the border tax.